Hello everyone, we would be solving 5 medium to high difficulty level PMP exam style questions today in this video. And for each of the 5 questions, we would be doing a detailed explanation on the correct and the incorrect answer choices. The intent of this exercise is firstly to test how well you are prepared for the PMP exam. So for example, you can use this scorecard that you see on screen to test your performance across the 5 questions. And secondly, the goal of this exercise is to develop your understanding on the correct process and strategy for solving PMP exam questions efficiently. Please give this video a like and let's get started with question number 1.
Right, so question number 1, guys, please read the question and try to solve it before we do this together. Okay, you can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so a senior executive approaches the project manager during the implementation phase of an enterprise software deployment project, requesting additional functionality that was not part of the original scope. So basically this is a change request. Okay, so after evaluation, the project manager determines that incorporating these features would significantly expand the project scope and budget while delivering limited strategic value to the organization. So a bit of an assessment was done, and the first round of, let's say, reasoning or first feel in terms of the way this will impact the project has been that it will definitely significantly expand the project scope, and it will definitely have an impact on the budget while delivering limited strategic value to the organization. Okay, so the question is, what should the project manager do next? Okay, so let's look at the options one by one. Option A, approve the request to maintain a good relationship with the stakeholder. I hope none of you have selected this option, guys, because this is an incorrect answer choice, because maintaining a good relationship with the stakeholder, and because of that, if you are approving a change request, that is a very, very high conflict of interest. Okay, so that is an incorrect answer choice. Let's look at option B. Submit the change request to the change control board for review. Okay, you can hold this option for now. Looks like a plausible option and looks like a plausible correct answer choice, but let's look at the other answer choices before we arrive at this and finally evaluate that whether B is the correct answer choice or not. Okay, option C, reject the request since it provides little business value. Again, you can't straight away reject the request, and even the project manager cannot approve or reject a request. It has to come from the change control board, that decision. The project manager can recommend, but he or she cannot approve or reject a change request straight away. Let's look at option D. Discuss the impact with the stakeholder and guide them through the formal change control process. Okay, so that's also a very, very close answer choice, guys. Okay, so we have eliminated option A, we have eliminated option C, and we are left with option B and option D. Okay, now if you look at option B, it talks about submitting the change request to the change control board for review. Okay, however, let's look at option D. It is basically a pre-step before you go and actually submit the change request, which is to discuss the impact of that change with the stakeholder and then guiding them through the formal change control process. Okay, now if you think about this logically, this is exactly what you should do as a project manager before point blank taking a change request, drafting a change request document and then putting it out to the change control board, because that way you are not sort of playing the role of a project manager, a sensible project manager, because you have not discussed the impact of that change with the stakeholder before you have taken that to the change control board. Okay, and as a sensible project manager, if you do that initial discussion with the stakeholder, and if the stakeholder is aware that okay, the change that has been proposed might actually sort of cause issues with the project in terms of maybe expanded scope, expanded budget, etc., etc., they might as well backtrack on that change request, and they might say that, look, initially I thought that this might be a good idea, but now after you have sort of made me reconsider my decision, since you have discussed the impact with me, I take back my request and I probably will not go with this change request. So this entire drafting of the change request and going to the change control board for approval, etc., etc., will be unnecessary. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option D, which is to discuss the impact with the stakeholder and guide them through the formal change control process. Because think about it that if you do this step first, hopefully there will be a lot of change requests that will get eliminated straight away, because then the stakeholder will be taking an informed choice, right? Now, then even if the stakeholder thinks that no, I have been asked by my project manager to evaluate the pros and cons, and still I want this change request to go through, then probably you can draft the change request on a piece of paper or as per the mandate which has been given to you by your project management organization, and then you submit that change request to the change control board for review. Now, after this review, the decision might as well be no. Okay, it might not always be yes, so you have to be careful with that. However, to do that litmus check before you take any change request to the change control board, you should not jump the step of actually discussing the impact with the stakeholder. Because if you look at the question here, the question is mentioning, or let's say the scenario in the question is mentioning that after evaluation, the project manager determines that incorporating these features would significantly expand the project scope and budget. Okay, however, probably that information has not been fed back to the stakeholder, right? And that is what option D is trying to do, that feeding this actual information back to the stakeholder and discussing the impact with the stakeholder and then guiding them through the formal change control process. So the correct answer to this question is option D. Option B is a very close answer choice, but because it jumps that critical step of evaluation and sort of communication with the stakeholder, option B is an incorrect answer choice. So the correct answer to this question is option D.
Now, if you are preparing for the PMP exam, I would suggest that you check out my PMP exam preparation courses on Udemy. All the courses are very highly rated amongst the students, and many PMP exam aspirants have passed their PMP exams with the help of these courses. You can check the reviews on Udemy, and all the relevant links will be provided in the description section of this video. And now let's move on to question number 2.
Right, so question number 2, guys, please read the question and try to answer it before we solve this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Okay, so let's get started. A project manager is overseeing a global product development initiative with team members located across multiple continents. The remote team has expressed challenges with coordination, frequently missing critical project communications, etc., etc. Okay, so what should the project manager do first to address this issue? Okay, so let's go through the options one by one. Option A: organize daily stand-up calls at a predetermined time that works for most participants. That would be incorrect, right? Because you might have a predetermined time which is like 6 p.m. In the eastern part of the world, and it's like 6 a.m. in the western part of the world, but that might not work for most of the participants, right? So any kind of an initiative which mandates team members being present real time, live, even if it is virtual, that is a bit of a catch-22 situation, because what might be convenient for one might not be convenient for another person who is located like maybe 12 hours in a different time zone, right? So that way option A is incorrect. Let's look at option B. Develop a communication management plan that accommodates different time zones. Okay, that looks like a plausible option, because in this kind of scenario, what you can do is you can have sort of a Slack or sort of a Microsoft Teams or SharePoint portal where you can have like recorded meetings, pre-recorded conversations. Even if you are willing to instruct some of your team members at a different time zone, you can record your conversation, keep it within your Slack window or your Slack forum or your Teams folder, and when those team members resume their working hours, they can come and review that as well. Okay, so that need not be live, that need not be real time, but it is as effective as it can get. Okay, however, these kind of things needs to be captured in the communications management plan. Okay, so B looks like a plausible option. Okay, so let's hold that option for now. Let's look at option C. Designate a team leader in each time zone to consolidate updates. That is also incorrect. Okay, that is something which is very person specific. Do you have budget to designate team leaders in each of the time zones? Okay, to consolidate updates. It's a very broad option, not very feasible option. If you have done projects in real time, you know that. So let's look at option D. Rely solely on email communication to ensure everyone receives identical updates. Okay, so relying solely on email communication, again, that is not something which might be very prudent, because you might need to share like video files, documents, presentations, kind of recorded conversations or instructions. Those kind of things might not happen only over email. So only resorting to email communication might not be beneficial for everyone, even if everyone receives identical updates. Okay, so there is no point receiving identical updates on something which is not helpful, right? So that is why option D is also incorrect. So the correct answer to this question is option B, which is to develop a communications management plan that accommodates different time zones.
Now, before we move on to question number 3, guys, I would like to introduce you to my PMP Exam study group on YouTube. It's a monthly subscription based membership model, and you will get daily posts on highly nuanced tips and tricks to prepare for your PMP exam, which are generally not discussed on my YouTube videos. You can try it out for a few months and cancel anytime if you wish. Feedback from students for this study group has been excellent.
Question number 3, guys. The drill will remain the same. Please read the question and try to answer it before we solve this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's start solving the question. After one of the project deliverables was delayed, the project manager decides that a feature upgrade is required for the product to meet the KPIs, okay, like the key performance indicators. In your PMP exam, you will find such short abbreviations often within the question stem. Now, these are very common abbreviations which are used in the project management body of knowledge. And if you have been a project manager and you are writing the PMP exam, you should know what is a project KPI. Okay. The following steps are taken by the project manager. Okay. So basically, one of the project deliverables has been delayed. Now, the project manager thinks that if you do a feature upgrade to meet the project KPIs, probably you'll be able to make up for the delay. Okay. So a formal change request is chartered and the same is communicated to all the stakeholders. However, a feedback is received that this communication did not meet the stakeholder expectations. Okay. What is the next best step for the project manager? Right. So to summarize, there has been a delay in a project. The project manager thinks that if a feature upgrade is done, probably that delay or the KPI can be salvaged to some extent. And for that, there is a change request which is chartered and the change has been communicated to all the stakeholders. However, some of the stakeholders feel that the way in which this change has been communicated to them does not meet their expectations. Okay. What is the next best step for you as a project manager? Option A. Review the stakeholder engagement plan and redraft the communication accordingly. Okay, a potential option. Let's hold this for now. So you might say that, okay, if I review the stakeholder engagement plan, redraft the communication accordingly, that might be a good option. Okay, now I will question that what is the content of stakeholder engagement plan. Okay, think about it while we evaluate the other options and come back to this in a minute. Option B, hold meetings with the stakeholders to understand what was missed. Okay, so you can think that, okay, let's do all the meetings with all the stakeholders and try to understand what has been missed. Is it a productive use of your time as a project manager? Questionable. Okay, but let's hold this for now. Option C, roll back the feature upgrade request and resort to the base plan. This is incorrect because this basically means that you don't have any credibility as a project manager, because once you have decided that something needs to be done to salvage the delay or to improve the project KPI, now you are rolling it back because some of your stakeholders have expressed concerns regarding the way this has been communicated to them. Okay, so that gives an impression that you are a project manager who is not confident about the decision that is being taken in a project. Okay, so basically you do not want to convey that kind of a picture to your stakeholders. So option C is ruled out straight away. Option D, review the communications management plan. Okay, interesting, because if you go back and watch few of my other PMP Q&A videos which I publish every month, you will see that we discuss in some of the videos that correct way to evaluate such answer choice, which basically talks about what is the next best step, because it's hinting to a sequence framework that we learned in our 35 PDU course as well. So in such kind
of a sequence where you are presented with a problem and you have to propose a solution. Basically, the premise is you have to review before you act. Okay, do not take an action before you review the relevant documents. You do not review anything random. Okay, so you have to review the relevant documents, very important. So we solve such kind of problems extensively in our 35 PDU course, right? But at least you get the premise here, right? Because when you are presented with a problem or a challenge as part of the scenario, you should always review first before you take an action. Action is never the first step. Okay, now when it comes to review, you can review the stakeholder engagement plan or you can review the communications management plans. Now here comes the second part of this framework, that what you need to review should be relevant to the problem that you are facing. You should not review here the stakeholder engagement plan, because what is the stakeholder engagement plan? It talks about the engagement levels of your various stakeholders, and it also discusses that if one of your stakeholders is less engaged in your project, but the design state of the stakeholder is to engage him or herself a bit more, what should you do to make that stakeholder get more engaged in your project? What is your plan of action? So these kind of details are talked in the stakeholder engagement plan. It doesn't discuss much about the way you should be communicating with your stakeholder. So even if option A talks about review, it is giving you a incorrect document or a incorrect artifact to review. Okay, so that is why option A is out of the table. Okay. Now an important point to notice here is, guys, that how we are rejecting every option on solid grounds. So we are not rejecting any option just because it doesn't look right, feel right, seem right, hear right, etc, etc. Okay, that is not how I teach my students to write the PMP exam. Any option you reject should be based on solid logical reasoning based on the project management body of knowledge. Okay, period. Let's evaluate option B. Hold meetings with the stakeholders to understand what was missed. I'll say I'll rule out this option, guys, because that is not a productive use of the project manager's time. How many stakeholders you will meet and how many meetings you will keep on doing just to go back and forth in terms of what you are proposing as part of this change request, right? So that is definitely not a sensible option to go for as a PMP project manager. So that is why option B is incorrect. We definitely talked about option C, that is out of the table already. So the correct answer to this question is option D, which is reviewing the communications management plan. So it does fall into this framework of review before act, that you are basically reviewing some document before you are taking an action. But even more important, you are reviewing something which is relevant. Okay, so the communication management plan will basically talk about that whenever you are communicating a change request, what is the way you should communicate that change request to your stakeholders. So if you have missed that, probably it is expected for your stakeholders to come back and say that, hey, you know what, the way you have communicated this to us doesn't make sense to us because this was not aligned when the project was in planning stage. So you have to communicate with them within the aligned format of the communications management plan, and that detail can be found in the communications management plan. It can be one pagers, it can be emails, it can be memos, whatever it is, it should be documented in the communications management plan. So the correct answer to this question is option D, which is to review the communications management plan first and then decide on the next course of action, whether you want to do meetings, whether you want to do a Teams call, whether you want to redraft your communications and send it back to the stakeholders for approval, etc, etc. Okay, so that is not the topic of this question. The question specifically talks about what is the next best step for the project manager now with this scenario, and of course the next best step is that the project manager goes and reviews the communications management plan, and the correct answer to this question is option D. And now let's move on to question number 4.
Okay, so let's move on to question number 4, guys. So the drill will remain the same. Please read the question and try to answer it before we take this together. So please pause the video here if you want to. Right, so let's get started. A project manager is preparing the charter for an office relocation project. Okay, the project aims to move the company's operations to a new, more cost-effective location. The project sponsor advises the project manager to involve the department heads, okay, who are, let's say, the functional managers, to ensure a smooth transition plan.
However, the operations managers who generally report to the department managers. Okay, so you need to understand this basic level of hierarchy, that who is a sponsor, who is a project manager, who is a department head or a functional manager, and who is operations manager. Okay, so for example, the project manager ideally reports to the project sponsor. Okay, operations managers generally report to the department heads. Okay, so that is the general level of hierarchy which you need to understand if you are preparing for your PMP exam. And if you are having a substantial project management experience, or let's say some decent project management experience, you should not have problems in terms of understanding these kind of basic hierarchies. Okay, so let's come back to the question. However, the operations managers are not cooperative, okay, because they believe the relocation will disrupt workflows and reduce team productivity, because they are, let's say, the feet on the floor and they manage the operations day in and day out. Of course, they report to the department heads, and they are not very cooperative with respect to the project charter which you have documented, or which is in the process of documentation, because they believe that the relocation will disrupt the workflows and reduce team productivity. Okay, so which two actions are suitable in this scenario? And again, it's a multi-sided question and you need to select two answer choices from the list of 5 answer choices that are provided as part of this question. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices one by one. Option A: schedule a meeting with the operations managers to discuss their concerns and expectations. Okay, probably you want to understand first that what is the concern they are having. So why they are believing that this will disrupt the workflows, reduce team productivity, etc., etc. Because let's say the new location might have the right kind of tools and infrastructure in terms of not disrupting the workflows or improving the productivity, okay, instead of decreasing it. So you need to understand that. So option A might be a correct answer choice. Let's hold it for now. Option B: request the project sponsor to issue a directive mandating the operations manager's support. Of course, this is incorrect, right? This is a pure bureaucracy that it's like your way or the highway, right? You are requesting your project sponsor to issue a directive or a mandate to make the operations managers support you without any question. That is not good project management, right? So option B is definitely incorrect because it is highly bureaucratic and highly, let's say, autocratic as well. Okay, let's look at option C: present a data-driven evidence showcasing the operational benefits, as I was discussing, that the new location might have better infrastructure, better productivity aids, etc., etc., and of course the cost savings that the company will be gaining as part of the relocation. Okay, so a data-driven evidence always helps to put some method to the madness and helps the other party who is sitting on the other side of the table understand where you are coming from or what is your rationale or intent with which you are proposing something which you are proposing, right? So option C also looks like a decent answer choice. Let's hold it for now and we might come back to it. Let's look at option D, which is to escalate the issue by highlighting the risk of operational delays due to lack of cooperation. Again, escalation is something which you typically avoid in these kind of questions in your PMP exam or also in the real life scenario as well, because the moment you escalate, your credibility as a project manager goes down. Okay, because escalation means that you are sending that signal to your leadership that this is not getting managed by you and you are not able to manage the situation and it's out of your hands and you are asking your bosses to manage the situation. Okay, so that is why generally escalation options are incorrect until and unless there is some serious concern, which is, let's say, legal or quality or compliance, etc., or let's say those kind of instances where escalation might make sense. However, here of course escalation is not the first path of choice. Let's look at option E, which is to work with the project sponsor to revise the project charter to address the operations manager's concerns about productivity. Okay, you might say that, look, Ray, I am in the preparation stage of the project charter, so it's a good time now for me to collect inputs and revise the charter if necessary, so that later I do not face any problems whilst I am executing the project. Okay, so option E might also be correct. Now here is the funny bit: you have to select two choices, right? But however, you have landed up with option A, option C, and also option E. Now you have to eliminate one of these three answer choices to arrive at the two answer choices which are correct. Okay. Now, if you look very closely at option A and option E, guys, you will see something very interesting. Okay. Now, option A is suggesting that you schedule a meeting with the operations managers to discuss their concerns and expectations. Okay, which is good. Now, option E is suggesting that work with the sponsor, blah, 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 to revise charter to address the operations manager's concerns about productivity. Now, you tell me, guys, if you are not having a meeting to discuss the concerns and expectations first, on what basis you will go and update or revise your project charter, right? You can't, because otherwise you will be working only on assumptions. So first you need to do the meeting and then you go and revise the project charter if it is necessary. Now, mind it that it might not even be necessary to revise the project charter at all, and their concerns and sort of expectations might be sorted within the meeting itself. So option A is the first path of action which you need to take, and option E is after that, which you can take. However, option C is also very important, which you want to discuss in that meeting, because you want to present a data-driven evidence showcasing operational benefits on cost savings of the relocation, etc., etc. So these are the things you do in a face-to-face or in a Teams Connect. And if after that it is necessary, you may or may not revise the project charter. Okay, because mind it that whenever a project charter gets revised or updated, there is a lot of communication chain you need to do. So for example, you need to communicate to the PMO, you need to communicate to the project sponsor, you need to communicate to the rest of your stakeholders on why are you changing the charter and what is the rationale behind it, etc., etc. Okay, so option E might be a correct answer choice, but it does not supersede the actions which option A and option C is suggesting. And that is why option E falls apart. And the correct answer to this question is option A and option C, which are the two answer choices which you need to select as part of the response to this question. Okay. And option E is a very close answer choice, guys, but it is incorrect. And that is the reason, because it is after you do the meeting, after you present a data-driven analysis of what you are suggesting and why you are suggesting it. And if it is necessary, you go and revise or update the project charter. You do not go or update a project charter just right off the bat because someone has expressed a concern. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option A and option C.
And finally, let's move on to question number 5. Remember, the target is to get all the 5 out of the 5 questions correct. Okay. However, the minimum expectation is that you will get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct to consider yourself fairly well prepared for your PMP exam. You can assess your level of preparation according to this scorecard. So here comes question number 5.
Right, so question number 5, guys, please read the question and try to answer it before we solve this together. So the drill will remain the same. Let's go for it. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's get started. A legal firm plans to develop an application which could be used by customers to apply for patents. Okay, the sponsor wants the product to have 4 tiers: the basic tier, intermediate tier, advanced tier, and enterprise tier. Okay, with stepped up subscription packages. Okay, so basically there will be 4 tiers. The basic tier might be free, or let's say there might be a minimum charge applicable to the basic tier. The intermediate tier will be a bit costlier than the basic tier. The advanced tier is a bit more costlier than the intermediate tier, and the enterprise tier is the most costliest, or let's say the most premium product. Okay, and these will be like sort of subscription packages. We can assume that it will be monthly subscription packages. Okay, so which could be an ideal approach to execute this project? So very straightforward: waterfall, incremental, agile, and iterative. Okay, now to answer this question correctly, you should have very clear understanding of the different types of approaches of project management, such as waterfall or predictive, incremental, agile, and iterative. Okay, so if you have that, you can answer this question in less than 30 seconds. Okay, but let's take some time and understand these 4 options one by one. Waterfall, right? So waterfall is something which is like a start to finish relationship between each and every phase. Okay, so civil construction projects, mechanical projects, projects which are very clear cut, let's say scope elements. Okay, very clear cut start and end of each phase. These can follow waterfall approaches. Okay, now can this follow a waterfall approach? Probably not, right? Because it is an application. It has 4 tiers. There are incremental values getting added with each and every tier. okay, and it is a new application which is getting developed. So probably, let's say, thumb rule ballpark scenarios, waterfall projects doesn't work with such kind of scenarios where you have incremental project delivery. Okay, basically probably you have understood which is the correct answer to this question by now, right? But anyways, waterfall is incorrect. Okay, it is not the correct answer choice because of the reasons that we talked about. Incremental, okay, that is what we are talking, because if you see this transition of product feature from basic to intermediate, intermediate to advanced, and advanced to enterprise is a key feature of incremental project cycle. Okay, you have a minimum viable product, which is the MVP, which is your basic feature here. Let's say you add a delta to it, you go to intermediate, you add another delta to it, go to advanced, and when I say delta, I say added product features. Okay, if you move on to enterprise, it is another added delta, right? You will see many software packages or many subscriptions in the internet which are based on this pricing model. Okay, Microsoft Office 365 or let's say MS Project, it also I think has such kind of a model which can be used as an example. So these kind of stepped up models which are incremental value additions, the best type of project management approach is to have a incremental project management approach. Okay, so that is the correct answer to this question. Agile, probably yes, probably not. You can use Agile. You can say that, okay, Ray, I will be applying Agile here, starting with a very open-ended and exploratory scope and trying to drill it down and make it a more basic or more predictable scope in the end. That might be Agile, that might be hybrid, okay, questionable, but you can still use it. But again, I go back to my same premise saying that when you are solving a PMP question, you should go with the best possible option. Agile is not the best possible option here because this question scenario is giving you a telltale example of an incremental product feature. So you cannot look at answer options which will not link to this kind of a incremental project management scenario. So Agile is incorrect. Iterative, again, that is incorrect as well, because in iterative, what you can do is you do basically a prototype, right? You keep on refining the prototype before you actually come up with something which is acceptable, and then you build on the prototype. So the prototype building can follow an iterative approach. Now, once the prototype is finalized and it moves on to the actual construction, it can go into an incremental approach. So the project can flow from a iterative approach to an incremental approach once a prototype gets finalized. Okay, so that is another learning point which you need to keep in mind when you are studying such kind of cycles, such as an iterative cycle for this question, right? However, going by the logic that we have discussed, this cycle, which is a delta cycle, is not an iterative cycle. It is clearly an incremental cycle where you have developed the MVP or the minimum viable product in the first scenario, and you are increasing and adding features to it as deltas, okay, to go into additional pricing or additional product tier models. Okay, so that is incremental. That is definitely not iterative. So the correct answer to this question is option B, which is incremental.
I hope you liked the session, guys. Please press the like button and subscribe to this channel if you really found this session helpful for your PMP exam preparation. Also, do not get demotivated if you have scored less, okay? Remember, the key is to analyze and learn from your mistakes and course correct now so that you do not get caught out during the actual PMP exam, okay? Thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.